How to pass the bar exam the second time. 15 things I did that made the difference. Figuring out what to do after failing the bar exam is the worst. I was there this time last year, and some of my journey is documented on YouTube, and you can watch it if you want. But what will be most effective for you is figuring out what you need to do from this point to get where you want to be, which is the swearing in ceremony. In this video, I'm going to share 15 things that I did that made the difference for me, from failing to success. So, quick disclaimer, obviously none of this makes me an expert by any means. Make sure that you talk to professors and bar exam advisors and people who really study this. I'm not an expert, but I can share my own experience in hopes that that will help you. After all, I am a real lawyer who experienced failure and went on to pass the second time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that it's easy to do it the second time. And in many ways, it's a lot harder the second time, in my opinion. And I may get into why in future videos, but the gist is you have to compete with your prior knowledge, practice habits, and what happened the first time during the exam that makes you worried or anxious or whatever. It's really rough, but here we go. We're going to talk about 15 things you can do to come back and finish this thing. So the first thing that I did that made a huge difference is practice over memorization. So you get the huge books, you know what I'm talking about if you've already taken this exam. Stacks and stacks of books, right? The temptation is to memorize it all. And no lie, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to know the rules. But just spending your time memorizing constantly is not going to help you if you don't know how to go into the exam and do the thing. And the only way to go in knowing how to do the thing is to practice it beforehand. Practice over memorization. So I cut my study hours almost in half the second time. And before you think, oh, I can just go from like 6 hours to 3 hours a day, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the first time I was studying 12 to 16 hours every single day, and I was done by the time July came around. Like, I just couldn't, like, my brain could not function on a schedule like that. So the second time I could kind of see the same symptoms of burnout happening really early on, and I talked to like advisors and professors, and I was like, I cannot do this, I cannot sustain this again. Ultimately, we came to the decision that it would be more effective for me to work 8 to 9 hours a day than to try to just like cram everything and force myself to do way more than my brain was really capable of doing at that point. Think about it, you're already tired from the first exam, and your brain is trying to catch up from everything you just went through. So to then do it again is really hard on your mental stamina, and you need your mental stamina. So do what you can do, talk to some advisors, cut back if you were overworking yourself, cut back. Or if you were underworking, add in at least 3 hours a day or whatever you need to succeed. Next thing, I focused on learning the top topics over learning all the things. Now, it's helpful if you know all the little details about whatever subject you want to know all the little details about. But that's not what's going to get you the point. What you need on the exam is to know what the exam is asking you and be able to put in main headings that show the grader that you know what you're talking about, and then to put in those main rules. And if you can add a detail here or there, great, but your job is to put in that rule and then just analyze. Focus on knowing top tested topics more than all the things. And there are lists that you can get where it'll show you like the top 120 essay topics, or what's most likely tested on MBE, and your bar prep company, if you use one, might give you that as well. Use that to tailor your focus, and I'll go into more of this in my essay prep and MBE prep videos. Physical, spiritual, and mental well-being were my top priority over succeeding on this exam. And just like the quick synopsis of what I did, I worked out twice a day. I did Blogilates, which is a video series on YouTube that does workouts, and I did Yoga with Adriene, another video series of workouts on YouTube. One video, however long it was, of each of those. I did one at lunch, so that I wasn't experiencing the afternoon slump. And then I did one at night, the yoga at night before I went to bed. So then spiritually, when I would wake up, I'd get ready, I'd have breakfast, I did all that, and before I started studying, I would read, I think it was either Psalm or Proverbs, or maybe both, and then I would write down whatever Bible verse stuck out to me the most for my study day that day. I would just stick it on my whiteboard so that I could look at it consistently. So then mentally, when I knew that I was getting burnt out or stressed or scared or whatever it was that was not positive and what I needed to do to succeed overall or for that day, I stopped. And that's not to say that, like, if I got frustrated on an essay, I just stopped and said, forget this, and moved on. But if I knew, like, I was getting into a really not good mental space, I just stopped, took a break, did something else, like a different study area, not just like getting on Facebook or whatever. That would be beneficial for my mind and keep me on track instead of derailing me. Not to say I didn't have a few crying sessions. And the next thing is I made my own study plan the second time around instead of doing what my bar prep company told me to do, because I found that the way that it was set up for me just didn't really make sense. It was very randomized, and I know that there's science behind it and whatever, but for me, it made so much more sense to just go through and go in order, because you can actually, there's a page that you can actually, well, at least in the company I used, there was a page where you could filter the different assignments by subject, and that's what I did. And then I also added in supplements like critical past flashcards. That big book, what's it called? Emmanuel's MBE something. It's blue and white. It's an MBE book. I'm sorry, this was months ago. So had books that one of my professors had sent me that I was able to use those. I had all my books from before and then the new one. So I had all of these resources, and then I also went back and I used whatever I had available from my law school, and I just did all that too. I just literally used everything that I could. My own study plan instead of doing what other people who didn't know me told me to do. The point is, you know yourself better, and I mean, definitely have some advice, do your research, but if you know what works based off of those things, figure out a study plan that will work with the way your brain works. So then another thing that I did differently, and this is more like thinking actual test day, the first time I drove out the day before, and it was about a 4.5 hour drive. I drove out there the day before, stayed in a hotel, got up and did the test. I was not about to do that again. I didn't feel at the time that it was exhausting, but like looking back, it was like, that was so stupid. If you have someone that can drive you out there, that's a different story. But for me, not only did I need to not be traveling the day before, I needed to be studying the day before, because I'm somebody that if I'm not studying the day before, I will get very anxious and feel like I can't do it and panic. And that's exactly what happened the first time. The second time I drove out that Sunday, I stayed there a whole extra day. Yes, I had to pay for a whole extra day. I studied from like, I think it was whatever time the test started until 5 p.m. that day. So I just had like a shorter day of just like reviewing, and I can talk about what I did the day before too in another video. But just so that I had like something that was keeping me from freaking out. Along with that, the second time I chose to be confident. Going into it the second time, there's a lot of fear and like thinking, well, I didn't do it before, so why would this be any different? But you have to choose to be confident in what you know you've done. Next thing is your study environment. I actually studied in this room. The desk is right over there. If you've seen my other videos on YouTube of studying, like, it's right there. In this room for 3 months of my 4 months of prep every single day except for Sundays. And that's the other thing, like I took Sundays off always. But I studied Monday through Saturday every single day. Study environment makes a huge difference. Make sure you have somewhere quiet. The first time I was studying my law school library, and I thought that that would be a great thing, but I would try to like go and sit somewhere quiet, and then people would be talking, or like someone would come in the study room, and it just was constant distractions for me, which I know a lot of people can just be like zeroed in and focused and that doesn't bother them, but for me it was like kind of subconsciously distracting, I guess. Study environment's huge. Know how you work best. For me, I needed solitude and just to like be with my thoughts all day. So then more content focused. The multi-state performance test I practiced almost every day except for Sundays, which I took off in general, and Wednesdays, which were my MBE focus days. I did more than one full-length practice exam for every subject for the entire month before the exam. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were full practice exam days. And that looked a little different every week. Like sometimes it would just be like as many MBE questions as you can do and still have your brain cells, but then still aiming for like full hours and getting your mind in the place where like Tuesdays when you write, Wednesdays when you do MBE. And for me, maybe it's nerdy and weird, but for me that was really helpful because I knew like, oh, like on that Tuesday test day, it's like, oh, today's the day I write, because I'd already been doing that for a month and a half or whatever anyway. And so then Wednesday, it's like, oh, today's my MBE day, and it was just going along with my schedule. So then going into that with MBE, I focused on learning the explanatory answers and why answers were correct and certain answers were incorrect, even if they seemed like they should be right, whatever. I focused on the explanatory answers, and I had a system where I learned like the general rule, the specific rule, and then related rules, and that really helped me because I started to see related rules that questions would throw in as answers. And yeah, they're close, but I could start to see why those answers were not the correct answer. They were related, but they were not the specific rule. Second time around, I refused to look at statistics, not from the bar, not from bar prep, not from my school, not from anywhere. I was simply focused on what I was gonna do and not what statistics say I was gonna do or what anyone else said that I was gonna do. I mean, of course, I listened to advice and heard like, yeah, most people pass on their second time or whatever. I took that with a grain of salt and said, okay, that's nice, but what am I going to do? And just having that mindset was very helpful in staying focused on, yes, there are all these other people and this is their story and this is their story and blah, 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 but I had to focus on mine. When writing essays or MPT, simplify your rules, be practical. Don't just lose your common sense because you're taking the bar exam. I remember one question was talking about like an icy road, and they just kind of like threw that in as like a tiny little detail nobody would notice, but I took that and I worked when I showed them that I was paying attention to those details and thinking, which is what you want them to see. Have rule scripts and systems that can apply to any question. One of the things that I did the day before the exam is I literally went through and I made sure that I had like 3 or 4 sentences for every subject for my essays that I could just type out and it would apply to any question. Just show them that you know the rules and then break it down, analyze it. The most important thing that I did was my daily devotions and my countdowns that kept me focused on what's most important and where I was in relation to the exam. The first time I was kind of like just going through the motions and I did devotions kind of, but I was really relying on myself to do the whole thing. And like how hard I worked, which I did work hard. I'm not gonna say that I was one of those people that didn't put enough time or effort or whatever into it, because I did work hard the first time. However, I was relying on myself and I wasn't relying on God as much as I should have been, and that is one thing that I completely changed the second time. I made sure that my devotions in the morning were a priority. I wrote down those verses, and I also kept a little countdown of how many days until the bar exam so I could keep myself focused, and that went along with my spiritual and mental well-being priorities. So those are the 15. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Doing these things does not guarantee that you'll have the same results I did. I mean, these things were crucial in my success, and I hope that they'll help with yours. They were crucial because I chose not to beat myself up over what happened and what I did wrong. I just decided to take what happened and learn from it and find what worked for me, and that was some of these things, and then other things I'll talk about hopefully in the future. And that's what I hope you'll do with this. Figure out what works for you and don't give up or get stressed out. I mean, it's hard, but just keep going and figure out what works. I mean, I didn't find a system that worked for the MPT until literally a week before the exam, but I finally found it, and that is because I didn't give up on doing what I told myself I was going to do, practicing every day. Just keep going. You never know what's going to happen. You're looking for more content-focused material. I am in the process of creating MPT, MBE, and essay-focused videos that will kind of talk through what I did to prepare. Ideally, these should be coming out in the next 2 weeks, so be on the lookout for that. You can subscribe below if you haven't already, and then click the little notification bell so that you see when those videos go up. You can also follow me on my social media that I'll link down below too, so that you can see like when I say, oh hey, my MPT video is up, or I'm filming for my MBE, it should be up tomorrow, or whatever, so that you stay in the loop. Okay, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I believe in you. You got this. I'll see you guys next time.